Hey guys, welcome to my end of the year 2023 book review slash wrap up. I'm going to review slash rate every book I read in 2023. Most of these are young adult mystery thrillers and one adult mystery. So let's just get started. The first book that I read in 2023 is Five Survive by Holly Jackson. I'm going to do my best to remember my experience of reading this book because I think I read it in like very early January. This book is about six friends going on a road trip in an RV for spring break. And our main character is Red. At some point, the RV breaks down, and the six quickly realize that this is no accident. There is a sniper outside that is after them because one of them has a secret. And it's up to everyone to figure out who that is and what they're hiding and what the sniper wants. And as the title implies, only five will be surviving the night. I'm a big Holly Jackson fan. I love the Good Girls Guide to Murder series. I thought those were amazing. This one though, okay, so here's what I'll say. It all takes place in one night in a 31-foot RV. It's hard to keep a story interesting like that with little flashback. There's like some flashback here and there. I happen to live in an RV. Mine's about 23 feet, so I have some concept of how big that is. 31 feet, it really isn't that big for six people. I wrote down, is the main character Red neurodivergent? It's never explicitly stated, but something that I picked up on pretty quickly was that she's supposed to be neurodivergent. So that's interesting. I don't know if I've read a book before with a neurodivergent main character. I'd have to think about it. The plot twists were kind of predictable in this book, and I have a complaint that is very nitpicky and silly, but it has to do with the names. So the three guys in this book are Oliver, Arthur, and Simon. And Oliver and Arthur sound very similar. Reading this book, I was getting those confused the whole time. Even Simon, I was getting confused because even though that sounds different than the other two, Oliver, Arthur, and Simon all give off like the same vibe. Like they all have the same energy. You couldn't have named one of them like John or something. That would have been a lot easier, but maybe I'm just dumb. Something I liked was something they did with like the involvement of the police in this story. There's kind of a trope in media where as soon as the police arrive to a scene, everything's okay and they're kind of the saviors. This book kind of went against that, and I liked what they did with that. Overall, this wasn't a bad read. I just didn't find it that gripping. Again, like it takes place in a very small space, the entire book. So it's really hard to keep that engaging the whole time. I would give it a 3 out of 5. The next book that I read is a reread, and it is Dangerous Girls by Abigail Haas. I still have it. This came out in 2013. This is a pretty old book. I must have read it when I was like 17 or 18, and it blew my mind the first time. I think I picked this up again because I was camping somewhere with little to no cell service, and I didn't have any new books with me, so I just had to kind of go through and pick out something to read. And I ended up on this one, and I'm so glad that I read it again. Okay, so it's spring break of senior year. Anna, her boyfriend Tate, her best friend Elise, and a few other close friends go to Aruba. Elise is found brutally murdered, and Anna finds herself in a foreign country accused of her best friend's murder, and she's out to prove her innocence. This book has a very special type of plot twist. I can't say it, of course, without revealing, but if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. I love this type of plot twist. I love the relationships in this book. They're very fleshed out, real and complicated. I love the psychological thriller sort of aspect to it as well. People say this was inspired by the Amanda Knox case, which if you're familiar with that case at all, there are a lot of similarities. Overall, I really liked reading this book again, knowing the twist. This is like one of my favorite young adult thriller books, so 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read is The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is the sequel to Six Crimson Cranes, which I loved. So this one follows Princess Shiori. on her journey to fulfill her promise to return the dragon's pearl to its owner. I will say I didn't like this book as much as the first one. I feel like it kind of lost its tension. Like in the first book, we have this really great tense premise. She's this princess and nobody knows she's the princess because she's cursed to wear the bowl over her head, and her brothers are cursed to live as cranes, and we don't know if they're going to be cranes forever or if they're ever going to turn back into humans. I feel like that tension was kind of lost. There was nothing I was like holding my breath about in this book. So I would give it a 3 out of 5. Next, I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is the only adult book that I read this year. A lot of people have already read this one, but I finally got around to it. Okay, so this book is about a girl named Kaya Clark who lives on the outskirts of a fishing village called Barkley Cove. She lives in the marsh and she's basically raised herself. Her entire family has abandoned her, and she's basically learned to survive on her own. This book explores love, romance, relationships. There's also a murder mystery aspect to this book because Chase Andrews has been found dead. The town suspects Kaya of the murder. This book does a lot of time jumping, which I love. I love books that time jump a lot. To me, this book was a lot about loneliness. If I would have read this book in the loneliest years of my life, it would have torn me to pieces. Something I found really interesting and worth noting is that Kaya is this strange, attractive, weird loner marsh girl, and men just kind of start showing up at her doorstep with good or bad intentions, whereas a group of girlfriends or friends in general never ever are presented to her as an option. It's so incredibly relatable to me how difficult it can be to make friends as a loner, and how like friends are never just gonna show up at your doorstep, but men do. Kaya never had a friend group, and I think she could have really used one. Something I loved about this book was how detailed it was. The details of the marsh were so well done that the marsh felt like a character of its own. I love books where the location almost feels like a character. I saw some reviews that said you couldn't really suspend your disbelief enough to believe that Kaya could become so intelligent, having pretty much lived alone in the marsh her whole life and not gone to school, just because some boy comes and teaches her how to read. She ends up becoming like very articulate and intelligent. To me, that wasn't so bad. I think Kaya was just a smart girl and she had to fend for herself for like her whole life. She definitely had to develop some smarts. For me, the biggest WTF moment was Tate teaching Kaya about menstruation. I don't think that a teenage boy would have the maturity to do that the way that he did. I just think it would have been so much more awkward and weird that I had to kind of step away from a little bit and be like, okay, that was, I think, the one moment of the book where I had to work hard to suspend my disbelief. Now let's talk about the twist. I absolutely love the twist at the end, and now I'm going to talk about that twist openly with spoilers. So if you don't want that, I'm going to put a timestamp here and you can skip forward. From the beginning, I had a strong suspicion that it was her who did it because I feel like they kind of set that up. In the beginning of the book, they were kind of jumping through time and comparing the scene where the police found Chase Andrews' body and how there were no footprints. And then we would go back to young Kaya jumping through the marsh and hiding her tracks. I started to believe that it was either her or it was her and Tate. And I think the choice to make Tate completely oblivious to it was interesting. The only time when I kind of doubted that Kaya did it is when they started talking about disguises that she could have worn on the bus. That's when I was like, okay, this is kind of far-fetched. There's no way she like planned this all out. Where did she even get the disguises from? That's never really explained to us. But I mean, it could happen. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I think overall, that is where this book had to go. You know, no one else in that town did that shit. Like, it had to be Kaya. She would have never felt safe with Chase Andrews running around. She would have had to leave her marsh which she would never do. That's her home. That's her best friend, essentially. I also watched the movie after I read the book, which I also liked a lot. I will say I like the book better. I think it just had more time to go through Kaya's entire childhood and life and more time for description, so it just overall made a better story, but they were both good. This book was a 5 out of 5 for me. The next book that I read is Girls with Sharp Sticks by Suzanne Young. This book is about girls who go to Innovations Academy, which is a private school in the mountains. They exist under the watchful gaze of their guardian, and they are trained to be obedient, free from arrogance or defiance, free from their own opinions and interests. Our main character is Mina, and she and her friends are attending this academy. They're trying to kind of figure out what's going on there and who they really are. Overall, okay, this was such a fun read. Before reading this book, I kind of had the feeling that it might be more dark and serious, kind of like the book The Grace Year. If you've read that one is very like emotional and serious. This book wasn't that. This book was not at all triggering to me. I didn't find any scenes to be too intense. It took me a bit to connect with the writing style because in this book's defense, I read it right after Crawdad's, and Crawdad's is very like poetic and slow and descriptive, and this book was more literal. But once I got used to it, I absolutely loved it. I flew through it. This could honestly be a TV series. There's like twists and turns at every corner. I will say I did guess the big twist early on, but I was kind of like reading it and I was like, wait, wouldn't it be crazy if blank, like if this was the case? And then it was at the end. Yeah, I had so much fun reading this book. I would absolutely recommend it. This was 5 out of 5 for me. The next one I read is 14 Ways to Die by Vincent Ralph. This book is about, I'll just read you the premise from Goodreads because it's really short. 10 years ago, Jess's mother was murdered by the Magpie Man. She was the first of his victims, but not the last. Now, Jess is the star of a YouTube reality series, and she's using it to catch the killer once and for all. The whole world is watching her every move, and so is the Magpie Man. This book was very sad. It was very much about grief and very heavy on that. I would say this was less of a fun read. I wish that the YouTube aspect of this would have been played up a little bit more. Like, imagine if this book was a little bit more like mixed media, like say we got to read YouTube comments or something like that. Also, we could have gotten to know the other YouTube stars on this reality show better. There could have been some good comic relief characters. I feel like there's so much potential for that with like some cringy influencers who want to be famous. But I feel like this book had a big focus on grief and victims' families. I feel like we could have gotten to know all the characters better. I didn't really care for the main character, Jess. I would have liked to see more of a range of emotions from her. Just when I thought we might see another side of her when she arrives to a party, she doesn't even drink. Which, like, there's nothing wrong with not drinking as a teen, but I wish we could have been given more sides of her is all. Also, when suicide is brought up, Jess says she's starting to understand it, but she used to think people were weak for giving up on life when she's been through so much and she's still here. I just felt like that was kind of self-righteous. It was a good example of how Jess is throughout this whole book. Give me something. I'm not saying that she has to be suicidal to be interesting, but give me messy Jess if we're gonna focus this book on how sad she is. Sad teenagers make mistakes. Give me an imperfect character that I'm also rooting for. 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Fear by Natasha Preston. This is about a small fishing town in the dead of winter. It's freezing, it's snowy. There's a meme going around school, or around town, where everyone is sharing their biggest death fear. This focuses on our main character, Izzy. People at Izzy's school start to drop dead in the way that they said that they were most afraid to die. And Izzy is determined to find out who the killer in this town is. This book was kind of slow to start, but I thought it was really a page turner by the final third. I will say the 3 guys who were the main kind of suspects for Izzy, were all weird in a similar way. Like, they all just kind of suddenly show up in Izzy's life and all exhibit like kind of similarly strange behavior around her. The guy she has a crush on, Justin, she says she has a crush on him, but she does not show it. There is nothing to indicate she has a crush on him other than her stating that. Something I really liked about this book was we got to read from the killer's perspective. I think it even... Oh, I still have the book, actually. I think it even opens up that way. Yeah, the beginning opens up from the killer's perspective, and of course, it's anonymous. We don't know who it is, but... So this book has an ending line that changes everything. And personally, I thought it required more explanation. I also didn't like it just kind of because I didn't want it to be true. I would have preferred the ending without that part. I get what the author was going for, however. It was very chilling and dark and overall kind of a good fit for this book. But we spent the whole book getting to know these characters so well, I feel like we at least need an epilogue. You know what reading the ending of this book felt like? It felt like you're playing a video game, like a story game, and you choose the wrong dialogue and everything just goes completely to shit in like such a short period of time. I was just like, can we rewind? Like, can we go back? Like, what just happened? That's how I felt when I finished the book. I would give it like a 3.5 or 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is I Killed Zoe Spanos by Kit Frick. This book centers around Anna, who arrives to a small Hamptons village of Heron Mills for a summer nannying gig. This town is super on edge because recently a teenage girl named Zoe Spanos went missing last New Year's Eve. As soon as Anna arrives in this town, everyone's telling her that she looks just like Zoe, and she's starting to feel a weird connection to Zoe and that she might know something about Zoe's disappearance. Reading this was a breath of fresh air for me. I was like, okay, finally a thriller that really connects with me. This has been kind of on my TBR for years, and I never really went for it. I don't know why it never like was my priority book, but this was from 2020. I'm glad I finally read it. I would say it was kind of a mix between Dangerous Girls and We Were Liars. Dangerous Girls because we have a main character awaiting trial for murder. Our main character is kind of a bad girl with a history of drinking and partying. And We Were Liars because of the really detailed and well executed world building, specifically this East Coast wealth vibe. There's the fuzzy past / amnesia trope, and a little bit of family drama as well. I could tell this book would be really good by like the second chapter. It just has that writing style that really speaks to me, more poetic and descriptive and wordy. I love the weirdness of this book, something being very off the whole time and you're just waiting for it to somehow add up. I liked how much physical description went into every character. It was nice to have something to really picture. I love the whole idea of a bad girl / party girl from the city who comes to a small rich town to act like this put together family friendly girl. I didn't know where this book was going. The way it all tied together definitely wasn't what I was expecting, and overall it was a really great read. I would give it 5 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend that one if you haven't read it. Okay, the last book I read is Girls with Razor Hearts by Suzanne Young, and this is the sequel to Girls with Sharp Sticks. And this review is going to contain spoilers for the first book, so if you don't want that, you can end the video here because this is the last book I read. I'm not going to say like the big spoiler, but it's still going to contain spoilers because it picks up like right after book 1 ends. This book picks up right after Mina and the other girls escape Innovations Academy, and now they have to go into the real world and attend a real school in order to find an investor for Innovations Academy in order to try and shut down the whole academy. I liked the first book better, but it was still a fun read that I flew through pretty quickly. The real world misogyny in this book made it a little bit less of a fun read. You take away the metaphor of this made up boarding school in the mountains and put the girls in the real world, and you kind of just have regular old misogyny, which is kind of the point, but definitely less fun. Some of the dialogue, especially from the boys, was a little bit too on the nose for me. I feel like it all could have been a lot more subtle. It ended very abruptly, so I think I'm probably gonna have to pick up the third one to see how this all ends. We will see. I think I would give this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, and that is all. I read 9 books this year, which for me is a lot. If you watch a lot of BookTube, that's probably not a lot. Some people read like 100 books in a year, but that's just not me. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.